Hey, Brent, welcome back.
Great to be here, Jason. Thanks.
So when we had you on last time, I guess the first time is when you were with UGURUS, and then the last time left UGURUS. Now you're with someone new.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite companies. So for the ones that haven't heard about this, tell us who you are, what you do.
So my name is Brent Weaver. I'm currently the CEO of E2M Solutions. We're a white label agency that supports digital agencies to grow and scale their businesses on our platform with web, digital marketing services, and AI.
Awesome. And so what's it like running a 300-person company now?
Yeah, I mean, last time we talked, 2 months ago, right? I was gainfully unemployed, enjoying long walks on my
building
homestead.
a ramp in the barn that took too long. Honestly,
building a half pipe. Haven't gotten to ride that nearly enough. I was definitely lamenting on that because running, or at least leading the leadership team of a just about 300-person team is a lot. It's been definitely a big adjustment, but I feel like with my experience within the agency market and helping agencies scale, I kind of get to take a lot of things that I've been coaching on and consulting on for over a decade and put the best of those elements into practice in a really, sizable operation that has, hundreds and hundreds of projects and thousands of tasks every single month and hundreds of clients, and put some of those principles into action. And so that's been really fun. And the team is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know Manish or have used E2M in the past, or at least have heard the name as a sponsor of the platform and stuff. And so it's really been cool to join a company that already has a great culture and has a great product and has a great, commitment to service, and then just to be here to try to take that to the next level.
Yeah. So a lot of people listening, they're at a point where they feel like plateaued, and maybe they have 5 people, maybe they have 10 people, maybe they have 50, right? And probably more on the lower end, right? Of kind of feeling that they hit a plateau, because there's a no man's land in agency world, where when you're at 5 or 10 or maybe even 20 employees, everyone you feel like is coming to you for you to fix their problem. And then you hear of someone managing 200, 300 people agency shop, and they're like, oh my God, that would be 20 times harder because now 300 people are coming to me to fix their problems, which obviously is not true. So I guess, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of have to make that transition. And for me, it's been very abrupt. Like I'm certainly, I'm not the product. I mean, that's definitely been a shift for me from, kind of early UGURUS days to now E2M. Like, there probably should never be a situation where I personally need to get on the phone. I mean, that doesn't mean that I don't get on the phone with clients. I love talking to our customers. I love engaging with our customers, but I probably should not be the linchpin between whether we can make a customer happy or not. And so that means that my time primarily is, focused internally on our core leadership team and kind of helping to kind of build that culture and amplify the culture that exists so that they can go and solve those problems. And so I think that personally has been a shift for me in terms of thinking like, early days UGURUS or my old agency, if there was a problem, I'd just jump on a call. Hey, I can go talk to that customer, right? But literally with 350, 400 agencies that we support, if that was my SOP, I'd be swallowed up in customer calls, and I probably wouldn't do a great job for our clients either. So I think that's a shift that you have to start to make when you probably get to that 20-ish person size. I think our overall team at UGURUS was probably, contractors and everything included, was around like 50. And so I had started kind of making some of those changes that like, Brent is not the product, Brent is not the solution, and I think you have to start thinking about that leadership structure, management structure, spending more time thinking about the middle of the business versus just like the vision. And I think it's Gary Vaynerchuk. So the clouds and the dirt, right, kind of hang out there. I think as you grow the business, you have to start thinking about like, what's the leadership level?
You mean you have to have a vision? I mean, people actually have a vision?
I mean, it doesn't have to be like, I like crisp like business vision documents, that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan of, but I think at least you just generally have to have an idea in your mind of like, where am I headed? And the more people that you have on your team, I think the more crisp that vision needs to be, right? If you want to get, you're somebody who's done events, so to get 20 people someplace versus 100 people someplace, like I'm always surprised whenever we run an event and there's like day of the event, 200 people actually happen to be in a room. They flew in from all over the world, et cetera. They all got there, right? Well, in order to make that happen, right, we obviously had to communicate things very clearly about like why we're doing something, where we're doing it, the time and the place, and all that kind of stuff. So I think you have to create some of that. The bigger your company gets.
I always looked at it as, because I remember going through my role change from kind of an owner to a CEO, and what I learned was I had to have kind of a North Star. That was our vision, right? And it wasn't this long type out, like boring, sappy, I want to make you cry if you read it, and you got to memorize everything in the right order as our creed, right? It was more of like our North Star right now is to be a resource I wish I had when I was running the first agency. That's the vision I just communicate to the team. And what that does is it gets everybody rowing in the right direction. And it allows them to make decisions based on the business rather than based on, me and coming to me as what you're talking about with the linchpin. So like what I learned was set the vision and communicate it to the team, or make sure that they know it. Like, don't make it hard. Keep it really easy. I also looked at like what you were kind of alluding to of like coaching the leadership team. Those are the only people I coached. And then I would show them how to coach the rest of the team, and so on and so on. And then understand the financials. Don't be a guru in QuickBooks and Excel. Like, just understand the KPIs, build the key relationships, and be the face of the organization. That was it.
Yeah. I'd say if you looked at our internal accountability chart and looked at the CEO seat, I would say that pretty well covers it, right?
How many direct reports do you have?
That is evolving. So Manish, when he, I kind of first 30 days, right, I'm kind of stepped into what he had created in terms of this system. And I think one of the amazing accomplishments that he did was he really built these like independent, autonomous business leaders. And I'd say to some level, it was somewhat of an informal accountability relationship, right? Like, it doesn't have like a huge amount of like regular cadences with people. Like, people kind of autonomously run like a division, and then they like communicate with him, very, very often. So I think there was around 11 people that officially report to me, but I think in a practical capacity, that number is probably closer to like 8 or 9, and changing as we make some functional changes to building out a marketing team, and also like our new kind of AI division is kind of growing out of other divisions. And so there'll be like a distinct AI division that we're...
You don't have much free time anymore now. That's a lot of people. We need to talk to Manish, man. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was funny. I was doing an onboarding with a provider that, is going to help us with some things, right? And they have us... as an agency owner, I had lots of clients do onboardings, right? So I always love when I get an onboarding. I'm like, oh, I get to return the favor of all the clients that didn't give me a good onboarding, right? But we were going through the onboarding, and one of the questions was like kind of geared towards like, as a CEO, how much free time do you have or whatever, right? It was, and I think a lot of people that are providing services to agencies are really selling this idea of like time freedom or whatever, right? And we certainly were at UGURUS. I think at E2M, we're trying to create a very scalable platform for digital agencies, and we're very committed to like business growth is our number one priority. I'm not looking for to work less necessarily in my role. Like, we have a very clear like 3 to 5 year kind of business vision that we want to achieve, and it's not like, oh, Brent needs to take, 4 months a year off or something, right? Like, I was brought in as a CEO to run the company, not to work half-time or whatever. So I was like, look, business objectives are number one priority. Vacations and my free time, like, let's not talk about that. Right? I'll manage my stuff myself.
Well, and that's really the difference too between the owner and the CEO, right? Like, when you bring in a CEO, you want them working, but you don't want to overwork them either, right? As an owner, especially when you start the damn thing, like you've started a bunch of businesses. We're the chief damn distractor officer. I even distract the vendors that we use, right? Like I use you guys for services. I'm like, I distract the hell out of your team, right?
Yeah.
And so it's good for the owner to kind of be able to eliminate some of those things or have the option
Yeah.
to, right? Like it's a different beast. Now, of course, I applaud you for being able to work for someone too. Just because a lot of times when you're on the other side, you almost become unhireable sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, there's, certainly when it was time to move on from UGURUS. I mean, it was like, all right, do I, my biggest question to myself was like, do I buy or build? Am I going to buy a company or am I going to build a company? And it really wasn't on my bingo card to join a team. Right.
No.
I think that once Manish and I started talking, I started thinking, okay, well, that actually could be an option here that would kind of check my boxes around. Like I personally didn't want to be the product. I think I did that with UGURUS for at least the first 7 or 8 years. It was and even towards the end, it was still very like I was jumping in with the training. There was a large expectation that I was participating in the events and the community and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't really want to be the product. That I wanted to have some type of meaningful equity in whatever it was. And I think as somebody who's exited multiple businesses, I know that the reality of you maintaining 100% equity in a great business is very like slim, right? I mean, I'm sure there's lots of cases where it happens, but I think as you bring in partners and investors and things like that, so I didn't necessarily need to have like 100% in order to feel satisfied in that, and I needed a lot of autonomy, and I needed some freedom. And I don't look at freedom as like time off necessarily, but I think I was able to check.
You could choose your path.
Right. Like Manish isn't calling me and saying, like, hey, do this right now. Right. I mean, we have some strategic objectives that we've agreed to. And I'd almost even liken it to, I think E2M is at a level maybe similar to like a professional sports team. I doubt the top coaches are micromanaging like the players in terms of how much they practice or whether they're practicing early mornings or weekends, right? Like I think top level performers can kind of manage their own stuff really well. And then just, work to those business objectives.
Yeah. I mean, I learned that lesson very early on. So when we started working with companies like Aflac and Lotus Cars, and I was chatting with the CMOs, like one-on-one, they barely knew marketing. They were horrible at marketing. And I was like, how are these people making what they do for these biggest organizations in the world and don't know the basic stuff? And then what I realized was they were great leaders and they could build leaders in the organization. And they put the right people to do that stuff. And that's the true sign of an amazing company where, it can, you have the leaders and they go, this is the direction we're going. And then people find their way to that. And, one of the things too, that everyone can start doing this on their team. So if you feel that everyone's constantly coming to you for advice to solve their problem, use this 1-3-1 method that I would always do. I'd be like, what's your problem? What are 3 possible outcomes that you're thinking of doing? And what's the one you suggest? And you do that enough, they'll stop coming to you. They'll be like, Jason just makes me go through this 1-3-1 crap, which I'm going to go through before I even go to him.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah. I think that's getting people to think about what's happening in the business. I mean, that's definitely something that one of the things I feel like I learned from some really amazing leaders at DigitalOcean, was really digging into kind of the overall business performance in terms of like, metrics and scorecards and things like that. But more importantly, like digging into the causality and the first principles behind it. Like, to sit and say, I'd come into a weekly business review at DigitalOcean and say, okay, well, week over week, we had a great sales week, right? Our numbers went up, right? And the kind of Brent 1.0 would have just been patting himself on the back and like, I did great this week. We did great, but the leaders there, well, why did that happen? And if you gave like a generic answer, well, I think, we had more sales calls. Well, why? Right. It was like they would dig down to this why. And if you couldn't clearly articulate what was the driving cause behind a number going up, then it was just as bad as a number going down, right? Like you got almost in just as much, trouble or, public shaming in a group WBR if you didn't truly understand, why numbers were going where they were. So we had to at all times really have a firm grip on our business and why it was going up, why it was going down, why it was staying the same. And I think that's something that I've had a lot of fun bringing that kind of value into the E2M organization, where we can look at a number and say, okay, well, this is how we're performing week to week, but what's the root cause of this? Why is this happening? And how specific can we get in that? And I think once you get to those root causes, whether it's leads, a client sending a testimonial in, client happiness, retention, I think when you get to those root causes, you get really clear about what you can, what kind of things you can do to make the company better, or what you can avoid, killing something that already is good. Right? I mean, that's almost my biggest fear at E2M is like, do no harm, right? Come in as a new CEO and just don't screw anything up, right? That's like the first order of business.
Yeah. I would say I've heard something. I don't remember who said this, because look, Manish brought you in for a reason to take to the next level, right? Because and think about this too. Like, I've gone through this many times. That was one of the reasons I sold the first agency. I felt like I reached my max, and I was holding back the agency. And I remember I was telling Manish this. I was like, "Don't feel that you've reached your max, because you're always going to keep learning." So, like, when I look back at what I knew with Solar Velocity, I'm like, "Oh man, I could have built this to $100 million agency with all the stuff that I know now of putting it all together." Just took me a lot of times, a lot of slaps in the face, and lost limbs, and crawling around, right? But where was I going with this? I don't remember
my comment about like do no harm, like just don't screw up was already there, right?
The do no harm. I heard this they said, any change that you make is always going to result in 20% churn, right? So whenever you're making a decision on making a change, you got to make sure it's more than 20%.
In terms of like growth, right? You'll see
growth. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So if you're going to do change for the long run, make sure the short-term one is like 20%, then it's a wash. And then you're setting up for the long run.
Yeah.
Or, make sure it's more than 20%. But if it's like, I'm going to do this little change because I want to, and I think I'll get 10% more business, well, you're probably going to lose 20%.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I was like, I start thinking back, I'm like, when that number kind of works itself out.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's good mindset to keep. I mean, I think, a lot of, I don't know if I mentioned this on your last podcast. We've talked about flying, I think, before, but, like you kind of
you need to get back into it.
I know. But, you fly on like visual flight rules versus instrument flight rules. And, obviously your destination, right? If you're flying, and for our listeners, right, when you're flying a plane, you can either look out the window and kind of direct the plane, right?
Oh, that's fun.
And they let you fly within a certain flight plan, right? There are certain limitations to how you can fly when you're just looking out of a plane window, right? But instrument flight rules are when you fly the plane purely by the instruments, and you don't have to look at the window. And you can fly to much larger, much further destinations, right? So like modern air travel as we know it is instrument flight rules. It's not like you're, Southwest pilots like flying by looking out the front windshield, right? Like they're looking at all those dials, right?
Yes. Sometimes they're not.
So that's one of like, I think the things that like coming into a business that's been able to get the success that E2M has been really fun. Because there's still quite a lot of the business that runs off of what I'd say is like visual flight rules, right? It's kind of like, versus like really running the business on the numbers and having like a data system that helps inform us like what's working, what's not working. So I'm hoping that when we do things like that, right, having really great data in the business, it'll give us an opportunity to fly to further destinations. We're trying to do some really audacious things around AI. We're doing some audacious things around some emerging web and marketing platforms like Go High Level that are also leveraging a lot of AI. And so we have these really big ideas around how we can help agencies scale around those platforms. And I think building some of that rigor in the business is going to help agencies ultimately scale. Because I mean, that's number one for us, is an obsession about our customers, right? We want to solve for the customer. We want to make our clients more successful. I think as a back end production team, like that's our real North Star, is how can we enable agencies to scale faster? How do we enable them to be more successful?
Yeah.
And so I think that's been a lot of fun to work on some of those problems.
Yeah. I mean, for everyone listening, I want you to really kind of go back a couple minutes from what Brent was saying about when DigitalOcean would ask why, and around that framework. If you guys start asking your team that and plugging in AI, like, hell, I don't care what you use around AI, just plug in the data and try to figure out the reason. It can't just be, oh, we're slow because of the summer and everybody's taking vacation off, right? Like, I'm tired of that excuse.
Yeah.
I'm like, business keeps going on. And so figure out the why, or I'm going to kind of ridicule you a little bit until you understand that, or I'm going to replace you with someone that can actually provide the why. Like, why are we growing? Why are we staying the same? Why did we lose whatever? Just so we can make better decisions. Like, all this is running a business, running an agency. It's all guessing, but you're trying to guess on more, like, when you have more cards in your hand or a little bit more knowledge. Even if you have all this data in your hand, it's still a guess. Like, no one can go, this is 100% going to work.
I mean, saying that seasonality is causality, right? I mean, I think it's a macro factor. I mean, you could look at, your year-over-year performance, but, looking at, okay, well, what do we do with our ad buys around that time of year? Are we sending emails to our list? Do we have, for example, with us, we do get a lot of clients from partnerships like yours, right? And so we do see this kind of influx of events in the spring where we attend 3 or 4 or 5 different events. And because we build relationships or reinforce relationships, we do see a lot of clients come in to the business in the following couple of months. And then there will be this typical dip, right? Which you could say, okay, well, that's seasonality, the summer or whatever, right? Well, really that's because there's no agency events going on and we don't have another great option, or maybe our other options aren't being invested in at the level of the partnerships, right? So we could say seasonality, but I think if you double click on that and get to like first principles, it's not because it gets warmer outside. It's not because there's a thing called summer and kids are out of school, right? It's literally because we're at events making a huge marketing investment in Q1 and early Q2 that basically stops towards the end of Q2. And then we see like lead flow go down, right? So that would be an example where we want to look at something and get to that first principles and say, okay, if we want next June to be different than this June, then we certainly need to have a couple of additional marketing flywheels so that seasonality is never the excuse again, right? Because it shouldn't be. I'm not a huge fan of putting macro labels onto reasons, and that would be an area where I would have gotten a DO, right? I would have gotten my ass handed to me if I said seasonality in a meeting, because they'd be like, "What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean seasonality? What are you talking? The weather? It's warmer. That's why we don't have clients, right?" And so I think I could never attend a weekly business review and say that as a reason, right? Because people would be like, well, what do you mean seasonality? Like, be more specific, right? And so I think when you drill down to that, you get to root causes and you start to figure out like what's really happening in the business. How do we move the needle on that?
I'm happy you learned that when you got bought, because I bet before you got bought, you would have just chalked that up to seasonality, right? You went in and asked those questions. Am I right?
Right. Or at least, maybe we would have known like, hey, these are sometimes typical slow seasons. And we would typically try to come up with a campaign, right? But I think looking at the root cause, like what's driving the seasonality, I think getting into those 2 or 3 layers deeper has definitely been helpful. And then also putting numbers to it, right? Well, okay, so we didn't go to those agency events and that caused a contraction in our lead gen by X%. And so for us to prevent that happening in the future, we need to make an investment of Y in order for that to be solved for, and so putting some math to that, I think is, a lot of our leadership at DigitalOcean was former Amazonian, NVIDIA, right? So if you look at like, Amazon writing practices, there's a lot of content out there on that. there's, they have a crazy writing culture. And, learning how to write like that was really more about thinking than just the writing. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Brent, we'll have to have you back on. We'll talk about AI because I want to respect your time. For everyone listening, make sure you guys go check out E2M Solutions. They're amazing. I've never heard one bad thing. I'm still waiting. I always tell Manish, I'm like, this is crazy. And that's why you guys do such good at events, because you guys break that typical persona of the outsourced white label that we're all scared of, right? Just order takers, and they don't really understand me and time zone, all that kind of stuff. You guys kind of blew that out of the water. So everyone go check out E2M Solutions. Also, there's only 2 agency events you should all go to. Put your mind. No, I'm just kidding. But if you go to agencymastery.io, click on events, you'll see them. All joking aside. But thanks so much for coming on the show. Until next time, have a swank day. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it out. Click on the link. I'll see you soon.